There are so many amazing moments in Dog Bites Cliff, including one that had me howling with laughter for a good 5 minutes after it happened. It may happen again when I get to that point in the episode. This is the 19th episode of the 5th season of Cheers, directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows, and there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts along the way. It is a fantastic episode. I feel like it's also been a while since we had one that focused pretty much purely on Cliff. And I love Cliff, so this makes me very, very happy. It starts off actually with Diane painting her nails. She has all of these coloured cotton balls in front of her, and Carla passes some comments, as she usually does, and Diane replies, "You'll just have to find some other way of bugging me," because she's really happy. Nothing is going to spoil her mood. So Carla takes that as a challenge, and Diane looks away so she doesn't see Carla stepping up to her, and Carla smushes Diane's freshly painted nails down. And I actually watched this about, I think, 3 or 4 times. I rewound it to watch it because Shelley Long's response was just absolutely fantastic. But it did mean that 3 or 4 times I listened to the thunk of her knuckles hitting the bar. It sounded very painful. And of course, when Diane lifts her hands up, they're covered in cotton balls. And if you've ever painted your nails and had a cotton ball stuck to it, you'll know how traumatizing that is. Very funny, very well done. And to top it off, we cut to Sam, who has the most beautiful, subtle smile on his face. He's very clearly amused by the situation, and who can blame him? We then cut to a little bit later on in the same day, and Diane receives a phone call and a retreat that she'd wanted to go on, this purifying retreat where she can go and find out who she and Sam are as a couple by going on her own. It has an opening. They have a last minute cancellation, so she is able to go, and Sam says the most adorable thing, because he initially thinks Diane is asking him to go with her, and she reveals that it's meant to be for her on her own, and she begins to explain what it's like, and Sam begins to worry that it's going to be kind of like a cult experience. And he says to her, "You will be coming back, won't you?" And it was just the sweetest moment. I feel like Sam, as the episodes progress, ever since we had the courtroom episode, Sam is not afraid to reveal how he feels about Diane and the fact that he truly cares about her. And because we spent so much time with Sam constantly denying this, it's just so beautiful to see him being more open with his feelings. At one point, he refers to her as his fiancée in this episode when he's talking to Carla. And I'm still not used to hearing that, and whenever we do hear this, it's magical, it's beautiful. I love it. So Diane leaves, that's it, that's all we get of Diane. So I was kind of devastated by that, particularly as we are heading quite quickly towards the end of season 5, but what we got of Diane was pretty wonderful. Cliff then comes in with a cane, and we have the main narrative established, and the rest of the episode is all about Cliff. And they ask him, of course, what's wrong. He's walking with a cane, they care about him. And he says, "I'd rather not talk about it." And as Cliff approaches his usual bar stool, we cut to Norm silently counting on his fingers from 1 to 5. And as soon as he gets to 5, Cliff explains what happened, which I thought was rather delightful. And he was bitten by a dog. And there's some suggestion that he should sue the dog owner, and initially he doesn't want to do it, but Frasier says that he knows a lawyer who will be able to help him. It won't cost him anything. He might actually get a decent payout from it. So, of course, Cliff agrees to this, and we then get a phone call for Cliff at Cheers. Initially, we thought it was the dog owner, and Cliff thought it was the dog owner because Woody didn't say otherwise. And my first thought kind of was, why would the dog owner have the number for Cheers? Is that the number Cliff put down? We then find out that actually it was his mother, but that thought does come back a little later on. We then see Cliff coming into Cheers again, and Cliff does a lot of coming and going in this episode, and he might be entitled to $200,000. He's spoken with this lawyer that Frasier knew. That's obviously something that he's really happy about. And then Woody is still, his arm is still wrapped up. If you're unaware, Woody Harrelson actually did experience a genuine injury around the time of filming, so they wrote the cast on his arm into the episode. And he asks Sam if he could sue for his broken thumb. And Sam asks, where did you slip on the ice? And Woody points out, just outside the bar. And understandably, Sam very quickly tells him, no, he doesn't have a case for that. We then have a woman coming into the bar. And immediately, it is very clear that she is absolutely gorgeous. I think they probably spent a decent amount of time trying to pick the perfect outfit to make her look as drop-dead gorgeous as possible. She has this bright green dress on, and because she has red hair, this really stands out, and the two colours kind of work well together, and she's absolutely stunning. This is a woman called Madeline Keith, played by Anita Morris, and this is where we come back to that thought about why she would have had the phone number for Cheers, because we then have to realise she had the address of Cheers. She comes in and announces that she's looking for Cliff, and Cliff left this letter in her mailbox, as we know he did, and he clearly must have put down that she could find him at Cheers, which I just think is absolutely adorable. And Cliff is unable to speak because she is absolutely stunning. And then Norm comes into the room and is unable to speak. And Carla is standing between them and remarks, great, it's stereo, which I thought was rather fabulous, and Cliff and Norm are both babbling, and eventually Madeline offers to help Cliff with the doctor's bills, because of course she feels bad that her dog was responsible for the injury. And the next thing we know, Cliff comes into Cheers wearing a suit. He looks absolutely fantastic. He's actually going out to dinner with Madeline. And he steps away from the bar, and Carla remarks that Madeline is clearly just going out with him to try and get him to drop the lawsuit. And we have some really great moments immediately after this. They realise that they probably should try and tell Cliff about this so he doesn't get too invested in this and get his heart broken. And Norm points out that whoever does tell Cliff will probably never speak to that person again. So immediately Carla volunteers to do this. But I actually think that Carla genuinely cares. Just the way she approached him, the way she went about it, it just seems like Carla does care about Cliff. And I feel like Carla, back in the day, maybe 2, 3, 4 seasons ago, I don't think she would have even bothered sheltering Cliff initially from her realisation that Madeline was just playing with his emotions to get what she wanted. But the fact that there was this moment of discussing it with the others first and then being the one to tell him, and I think even though she did call him an idiot, I think she actually, for Carla, had quite a soft approach to telling him, and I think that definitely shows that Cliff is maybe not as annoying to Carla now as he once was. And what I love about this is Cliff knew when Carla told him this. Cliff said that he knew what Madeline was doing, but he said, and I quote, how often am I a sap with a beautiful woman? He's taking advantage of the situation as well. And I think I think it's great that he is, at this point at least, kind of in control of the situation. Because he knows what's happening, he could easily mess with her as much as she clearly is messing with him. And I think it was definitely the right decision. That's not to say that everything going forward goes Cliff's way. Madeline then comes into Cheers, where she's meeting Cliff, and she admits immediately that she was doing this just to try and get Cliff to drop the lawsuit. And she gives him this release form and tells him to tear it up, because this form would have got her out of the lawsuit. And I feel like she was not trustworthy throughout this. I don't think there was any point where I trusted her, where I believed that she had good intentions. But at this point, Cliff thinks that she's being sincere, and the release form is ripped up, and they're going to go and have room service at the Ritz. When they're at the room, Cliff phones Sam while he's in bed waiting for Madeline to get ready, and he admits he's scared, which is very sweet. And I think that this is one of the great things about Cliff in this episode, is that we get to see a lot of different sides to Cliff, because Cliff usually doesn't reveal his true emotions a lot of the time. But that being said, when he does, he's really vulnerable. But often he'll brush things off, or he'll have a comment to explain why something negative has happened. He normally doesn't openly show how he is affected by things. But here we have him admitting that he is scared, whereas in other situations he would pretend that this is something that happens to him all the time and he's used to this, and he is Cliff, this is something he knows how to handle. But we have that bit of vulnerability here, which I thought was really sweet. And Madeline comes to bed, and while she's fondling Cliff's hair and face, he says to her, "They just think that we're together because you want me to drop the lawsuit." And she drops his head in that moment, in protest of what he just said. She lets go of his head and he thunks back against the wall. And she replies, "If only that silly lawsuit were out of the way, I could focus my total attention on you, taking you to a height of ecstasy you never dreamed possible." That sounds too irresistible for Cliff. And it just so happens that Madeline had another copy of the release form in her purse, and Cliff very hastily signs this, thinking that this is going to give him the best night of his life, and that's, I guess, in his view, worth the potential $200,000 that he was going to get out of the lawsuit. And just after he's signed the form, Madeline tells him to close his eyes, and she's going to check her phone messages. And she checks her messages, and clearly something shocking has happened. And then we cut to Cliff coming back into the bar, and we find out that what was allegedly on those answer phone messages was a message from her husband. Her husband was apparently lost and presumed dead, but was wounded and suffered years of torture and used chopsticks to dig a tunnel and then reached a payphone to call Madeline. And that is quite a story to get out of having sex with Cliff. Definitely quite a story. And Cliff then begins to just accept that they were two lovers who were not meant to be together. I don't know if he genuinely... I think this is Cliff, I think, putting up a wall again and not revealing how he feels and brushing it off as something that has happened and he's just going to accept it. I think that's how he feels. One could argue that he genuinely believes it, but I think deep down he knows that she was definitely not telling the truth. And he starts to name all of these other lovers who never got to be together, and he names Heathcliff and Kathy. And this is the bit, well, Woody's response, where I basically cried laughing for about 5 minutes. Woody responds, "Heathcliff and Kathy, isn't that 3 people, Mr. Clavin?" And I'm never not going to think of Heathcliff and Kathy as being 3 people called Heath and Cliff and Kathy. Oh, brilliant. A perfect way to end the episode. Yes, I miss Diane. I really miss Diane in this episode. But to be fair, the thunk of her knuckles on the table is going to live in my head for quite a long time, and her expression with these coloured cotton balls on, just absolutely brilliant. Love the intro. Definitely kind of helped to make up for the lack of Diane in this episode. But it's brilliant. Really funny, very well done, a lot of really clever moments, and great to have Cliff as the centre of attention because it has been quite a while. Dog Bites Cliff is, needless to say, a pretty fantastic episode.